The race for mayor is heating up.
Leadership that's failing the city is almost a laughable comment.
He's taking credit right now for something he hasn't even done.
The sharp criticism from both sides and why they each say they're the leader Baltimore needs. Homicides in the city are on pace to be below 300 for the first time in nearly a decade. Our team looks into who and what could be contributing to that milestone. Baltimore has more 311 complaints than any other city in the country.
Maybe a dozen times so far this year.
We investigate just how deep the problem goes as residents sound off. And a heartwarming safe return for an Israeli teacher after serving his country in the war.
We work with tanks and with some special units.
He shares his story as his students and fellow staff welcome him home.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
My leadership for the city has an unemployment rate in its lowest in its history.
City government has not been so dysfunctional in every agency than it is under his leadership.
Baltimore's race for mayor heating up as Mayor Scott and former Mayor Sheila Dixon traded shots today, one day before the mayor officially announces his re-election campaign. Dixon saying the current administration has been a disaster, pointing to dysfunction in city government and what she says is a lack of transparency, while Mayor Scott claims the city is thriving under his leadership and that Dixon represents a return to a failed part of Baltimore's history. Good evening, I'm Vincent Hill. Those comments come It was a promise by then mayoral candidate Brandon Scott.
I will aim to reduce homicides by 15% each year in my term, getting us below 300 homicides in my first year.
It's a promise that took 3 years, but it seems like that day has finally come.
As we are all speaking today, Baltimore has a 19% reduction in homicides.
Scott attributing the reduction to his administration and his crime-fighting policies.
You heard those residents who literally saw the largest mass shooting in the history of the city say, these are the folks that we trust.
Political analyst John Deedy.
I often tell my students this: when the unemployment rate goes down, the president comes out of the Rose Garden to announce the news.
Says Mayor Scott is playing it smart when taking the credit.
The mayor, smart politically, will take credit for this stuff because when you're running for re-election and numbers are going down, you want to hang a star on it.
But taking a look at the numbers.
Great teamwork is how we're going to, reduce crime and homicides in our community.
The reduction in homicides and non-fatal shootings began once U.S. Attorney Eric Barron took office.
This Al Capone model of prosecution is designed to take violent people off the streets by any appropriate legal means necessary.
Barron touting that prosecution model as a success in reducing crime in Baltimore City.
Something we're doing in these past 2 years has been working.
Homicides are down 58 from this time last year, while non-fatal shootings are down 59. Deedy says those reductions can be attributed to another person besides the mayor as well.
With Ivan Bates in office now, people realize he's not playing. And he's going to do whatever it can to get people prosecuted and held accountable.
And another issue under the Scott administration, the failures of some Baltimore City public schools. In the past few years, our Project Baltimore team has uncovered grade-changing scandals and inflated enrollment at Augusta Fells High School. Project Baltimore just got the internal investigation into that scandal years after news of the problem first broke in 2021. It shows employees violated state and federal laws, but no one has been criminally charged. Now a city school's police officer is facing federal charges for allegedly collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent overtime. Project Baltimore found multiple supervisors signed off on that OT. Test scores in the school system are at record lows. Earlier this year, Project Baltimore found 23 schools had 0 students among those tested proficient in math. Wallet Hub ranked Baltimore among the lowest performing cities in the nation when it comes to education, citing low graduation rates. And despite all of that, Mayor Brandon Scott stood by City Schools CEO Dr. Sonia Santelises, something candidate Sheila Dixon disagrees with. Dixon says if she's elected, she would confront Santelises.
I would sit down with her. I would probably ask her, I think that it's time for us to look for someone else, unless she could make some drastic changes.
We are celebrating someone who doesn't get celebrated often enough. If it was up to me, your talent, your enthusiasm, experience, and passion has set our young people up for success time and time again.
And Mayor Scott has seen a few controversies in the last year. In September of 2022, the mayor announced a major shift in oversight and management for safe streets that left city council members outraged, saying the Scott administration didn't tell them about the change. They found out through the media. Last December, Scott raised eyebrows when he accepted a $5,000 campaign donation from longtime city contractor J.P. Grant. Days later, reports showed a company, Grant Finances, was awarded $12 million in city contracts. And in February, the mayor approved a deal with BGE to give the company board control of the city's underground conduit system. Many criticized that deal. The city council president and comptroller sat out of the Board of Estimates meeting to try to stop a vote on it, but the mayor pushed it through anyway. At the time, critics called it rushed and an abuse of power. And just this month, Scott vetoed the city council's plan for drawing new council districts, forcing the city to adopt his version of the new map. The veto sparked outrage from city council president Nick Mosby, saying it's not the way government should operate. And the entire time Brandon Scott has been in office, Fox 45 has had some hard time getting straight answers from him, or he often shuts down our reporters or just simply walks away.
But why make it?
Next.
Mayor Scott, how do you plan to delineate, I guess, the squeegee kids?
I'm going to delineate by telling you when we put out the strategy, as we just talked about before. You're not going to get a different answer. We have a process. We're sticking to it. Watch your back. Don't walk into the truck.
If you have a process, why was it leaked to WBAL?
See you later.
Next question. Anybody else?
I have one more.
Thank you, everybody.
And the latest Goucher College poll shows voters are looking for someone new to lead the city. Just 27% of voters say they would re-elect Mayor Brandon Scott. 39% say they would vote for Sheila Dixon, who formerly entered that race last month. 23% say they would prefer another candidate. So that brings us to our question of the day. If the election was held today, who would you vote for, Mayor Scott or Sheila Dixon? So far, 92% of those voted say Sheila Dixon. You can weigh in right now at foxbaltimore.com/vote.
We've been enjoying a nice and warmer than average pattern, but that's coming to an end as a cold front arrives. We're already starting to see a few showers over the state. Those will continue to move east overnight, and behind the rain, we've got much cooler temperatures for the rest of the weekend. I'll have a closer look at the timing of the rain and what to expect for the weekend and into Thanksgiving in my Weather Authority forecast. Back to you.
Coming up on Fox 45 News at 10, Fox 45 News is learning more about City Councilman Zeke Cohen's side gigs, why it's raising red flags for some, and how it could impact his run for City Council President. A new study shows Baltimore City residents have more 311 complaints than any other city in the country. A closer look at the numbers and frustration from residents. A very special homecoming in one Baltimore County school, how staff and students alike welcomed home a teacher after weeks of fighting in Israel. The situation in Gaza is getting more dire by the minute. Aid groups saying the humanitarian crisis in the territory is one of the worst they've ever seen. There are reports the death toll in Gaza is now well over 11,000. That number is only expected to grow with the ongoing conflict, the possibility of Israel expanding its ground operation into southern Gaza, and the dire situation when it comes to medicine and fuel shortages. Gaza's largest hospital is no longer operational.
People don't have enough access to water. We're worried very much about children having enough food and nutrition. We're worried about basic things like medical supplies and diapers, all the things that anyone needs for their children. We're just having trouble getting enough into the area and having the key thing for us, which is humanitarian access.
As Israeli troops push deeper into Gaza, internet and phone networks are down amid a potential long-term blackout. It's forcing aid groups to pause cross-border deliveries. Israel has agreed to humanitarian pauses for several hours at a time, but says it will not agree to any type of ceasefire until the hostages being held by Hamas are freed. Israeli forces have recovered the bodies of 2 hostages near Al-Shifa Hospital. 65-year-old Yeditha Weiss, a mother of 5, and 19-year-old Noah Marciano, a soldier who Hamas claimed was killed in an Israeli airstrike. Both were taken into Gaza during that October 7th massacre.
They don't see them as hostages. They see them as something. I don't know what, not as human beings. And it's just so shameful.
And one of the hostages in Gaza was featured on a Times Square billboard this afternoon. This billboard shows Emily Hand, a young girl who was taken hostage during Hamas's initial attack on October 7th in Israel. Emily has both Irish and Israeli citizenship, according to the Irish embassy in Israel. She turns 9 today. Emily's family attended the billboard's unveiling. Her father, Thomas, says he's holding on to hope that she will be returned safely.
We were hoping that she would be back by now. That would have been our prayers answered. But she's not. She's still down in the tunnels. So now we have to hope that she'll be back for Christmas.
And within hours of the start of the war last month, a Pikesville community sent some of their own to the heart of the conflict. But today, neighbors were celebrating a soldier's safe return. Fox 45 Amy Simpson has more.
For students at Beth Tefillah,
we have nearly 1,000 students.
He's just one of their teachers.
He just brings so much spirit and happiness to our school environment.
Teaching high schoolers Hebrew and Jewish history.
He makes connections with all of his students. He's approachable.
But this morning,
we're going to be right outside our classroom.
Even the littlest of students at this Pikesville school lining the halls, singing and dancing for a celebration, a homecoming for Matan Scheffler.
The war started Shabbat morning, Saturday morning, October 7th. The day after that, October 8th, I left to Israel.
Scheffler is an Israeli citizen here in Baltimore County with his family for several years to teach at Beth Tefillah. But just weeks into the school year,
we work with tanks and with some special units.
This teacher called to serve as a commander in the IDF, the Israeli army, in a war unfolding nearly 6,000 miles away.
Huge hug coming from Jewish communities around the world, specifically in Baltimore, really being felt in Israel.
Now back in Pikesville, less than 24 hours. First greeting his wife and 4 children yesterday afternoon. This morning, the school guiding Scheffler in a parade through the halls. And the theater. Before Scheffler was reunited with students from the senior class.
This is really one of the things I imagined while I was in Israel, knowing the huge support from all the students and staff and the clergy here.
The reality of war tangible for these teenagers half a world away.
And just knowing that he was going to go over and there was a chance that something could happen.
They're classmates of mine whose siblings are over there serving right now.
The leader of this congregation acknowledging the tensions of the war.
There's a lot of people who are speaking out against Israel, and what they really don't understand is that Israel and the soldiers of Israel, they're people like Matan.
But today, Beth Tefillah School focused on the safe return.
We had substitutes filling in for the last few weeks, but we're really happy to have him back.
Of one of their own.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
Amy Simpson, Fox 45 News.
Meanwhile, lawmakers in Congress have gone home for the Thanksgiving holiday without a plan to provide aid for Israel and Ukraine, despite calls from leaders of both countries for the U.S. to send help now.
I expect that all Americans who hear us now will understand this, to back Israel.
Please help us. We not ask send your soldiers. We ask continue to keep this support.
Last month, President Biden asked Congress to pass nearly $106 billion to address the needs of Ukraine and Israel, humanitarian aid to Gaza, and counter threats from China, and to strengthen the U.S. border security. But Republicans want to pass smaller, separate bills to address each issue on its own. Democrats, with the exception of a handful of progressives, back the president, insisting they don't want it to be separated in different bills. Torn up roads, leaky pipes, and no help from the city. A close look at why Baltimore residents are the most frustrated people in the country when it comes to 311 service.
How much of what happens at America's southern border will help determine who is the next president? I'm Scott Thuman in Washington with all new costs, poll numbers, and information coming up.
Our next weather maker is already impacting parts of the state. That's a cold front, and it's leading to areas of rain, not just here, but around the region, all the way up into New England. And those showers continue south. Behind that cold front, we're talking a big drop in temperatures over the weekend. I'll let you know what to expect, along with how it looks for the Thanksgiving holiday in my Weather Authority forecast.
All right, Jasmine, thank you. Taking a live look over the Inner Harbor tonight. It looks nice, but you just heard what Jasmine said. Cooler temps ahead. We'll be right back. Tonight, we're getting a better look at the cost of illegal immigration. This as the president holds high-level meetings to discuss options and confront some new poll numbers just 2 months before the first votes are cast in the race for the White House. Sinclair's chief political correspondent, Scott Thuman, has the latest.
And I want to thank you, Mr. President.
President Biden Friday meeting with his Mexican counterpart, President Lopez Obrador, looking for solutions to this surge at America's southern border. It comes amid a record level of border crossings, just under 2.5 million encounters in fiscal year 2023, and immigration again expected to be a key campaign issue.
Documents ready.
On who would better handle the crisis, 27% of voters polled said Biden, 50% said Trump, who will campaign near the border on Sunday and has already vowed to be even tougher than he was when president, promising to use all state and federal resources to
carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in American history.
Meanwhile, congressional Republicans released a report this week highlighting how much Americans are potentially paying to care for immigrants who entered the U.S. illegally. The report claiming it could cost Americans up to $451 billion per year for services ranging from medical care to extra demand on law enforcement and housing or shelter costs, though the White House insists Republicans share the blame.
There is a piece of legislation out there. And so if Republicans in Congress were serious and are truly, truly serious, they would look at what we presented.
Secretary Mayorkas, I want you to look at these innocent Americans.
Meanwhile, the head of Homeland Security fighting to keep his job.
They're dead because a 17-year-old, likely affiliated with the cartels, was smuggling illegal aliens into our country in Texas. You can honorably resign, or we are going to impeach you. And it's happening very, very soon.
So, too, are the first votes of 2024. In Washington, I'm Scott Thuman.
A new look at where city council members are making their money, what we're learning, and how it could impact the race for city council president. And Baltimore residents are more fed up with the city's 311 service than any other city in the country. What's behind the frustration with Baltimore's problems providing basic city services? We're following three big stories tonight at 10:30. Baltimore residents demanding the city improve its ability to deliver basic services, why Baltimore ranked last in a nationwide survey on 311 satisfaction. One of the candidates vying to take control of the city council is facing questions about a side gig, what we're learning as election season heats up. Plus, how much do we know about Safe Streets spending? A taxpayer watchdog helps us break down where that money may be going. And we start with a close look into the dysfunction with Baltimore's 311 program. It's an issue that City Councilman Eric Costello highlighted while endorsing Sheila Dixon for mayor this week.
In the past few weeks, the administration has suddenly rolled out action plans for increased responsiveness to 311 service requests for basic items like illegal dumping, pothole repairs, and streetlight outages. These are basic everyday city services. These are issues that have gone mostly unaddressed for the first 3 years of Mayor Scott's term.
A study looking into cities across the country found that Baltimore has far more complaints per 10,000 residents than anywhere else in the country when it comes to trash, vandalism, potholes, and other quality of life issues 311 should address. Fox 45's Jeff Abel is taking a closer look at what's behind the problem.
Well, it is broken roads like these here in Hamden that have kept the city's 311 system buzzing lately. And now it appears there are thousands of other reasons to complain too. In Hamden lately,
he said, hole, hole. Oh my God, we got to get off this street. And then he was like, this isn't even a street anymore.
it has felt
so you go up the speed hump and you fall in a hole.
Like the roads the city forgot.
And then you get over the speed hump and you fall in another hole. You had to go so slowly. I kept wondering, like, they are going to fix this, right? Like, at some point, surely they're going to fix this.
It was 2 months ago when city crews working on city water lines left these roads in critical condition.
To the point where they're able to put the asphalt back over.
Trenches were thick and patience was wearing thin. Complaints poured into the city's 311 system.
It's extremely frustrating because you really can't talk to anybody.
And it appears many people have been filing complaints, and not just about roads. A recent study of 311 complaints across the country found that Baltimore is the most complained about city in the country, logging more than 17,000 complaint calls a year for every 10,000 people.
Take it back to City Hall. You know, are they doing their job? It appears to be that they're not.
In fact, we began logging viewer complaints on our own website, and in 24 hours, we've gotten an earful. From cars wrongly towed to water wrongly billed, broken speed cameras, trash, rat infestations, parking violations. One reader wrote, "Nothing is happening."
Just runs rampant, and nobody's accountable.
We do love to be grimy and pretend like we're the worst city. I can't say that we are.
Today, after 2 months of broken roads and city complaints, crews began paving, finishing half of this street and leaving a trail of frustration down the road.
There's enough to complain about, if so much so that, hey, people are just going to start moving out of the city.
While Baltimore was the city with the most complaints, you'll have to travel to Riverside, California to find the city with the absolute least. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
And you can scan the QR code on your screen to tell us about the city dysfunction you've experienced, whether it's broken water pipes, sky-high water bills, robberies, or trash piling up in your neighborhood. We want to hear about it. The QR code will bring you to a form you can fill out with the details. You can also find it within Jeff's story on our website, foxbaltimore.com. With election season underway, the man vying for the top spot on city council is facing questions about his side gig. Councilman Zeke Cohen is working with an organization known for its progressive policy stances while taking a more tough-on-crime tone with voters. Mackenzie Frost has more.
Councilman Zeke Cohen early this month.
We can't continue to have this situation where young folks feel like they can act with impunity.
Calling for accountability for young people after a brutal attack of a woman caught on camera in Butchers Hill. The suspects, 12 and 14 years old, arrested and released within 2 hours.
It is not acceptable for the victim. It is not acceptable for the general public. And it's also not acceptable for those young people. They need to be held accountable.
Cohen looking to unseat City Council President Nick Mosby in next year's primary election. Friday, the Baltimore banner outlining council members' side gigs and their extra income, including Cohen's consulting work with Open Society foundations. According to Cohen's 2022 ethics disclosure, he helps leaders create plans and utilize a community approach to implement trauma-informed care. Cohen says his consulting work is done in cities outside of Baltimore, but he did disclose his contracting work with Open Society with several Baltimore city agencies, like the Health Department, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, or MONSE, and others, since those agencies work with Open Society. Open Society Foundations, founded by George Soros in 1979.
I set up a foundation to promote this idea.
And now the organization funds groups and projects in more than 120 countries.
This is something voters should pay very close attention to.
David Williams, a taxpayer expert, says disclosure is key, but Cohen's consultation choices is interesting.
Very curious to see Zeke have these two different lives play out.
This is not the first time Soros has been involved with elected leaders in Baltimore. In 2019, then City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby went to Portugal with the group of Fair and Just Prosecution, or FJP.
So Miriam, what is Fair and Just Prosecution?
We're an organization that's created a network among newly elected prosecutors who are committed to a different vision of the justice system.
When she came back, her office told Fox 45 News she was no longer prosecuting drug possession crimes. FJP is a project of the Tide Center, which wasn't founded by Soros, but describes itself as an organization that works as fiscal sponsors and advisors for other efforts. According to the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, Soros's Open Society Foundation gave the Tide Center, Tides Foundation, and Tides Advocacy over $30 million between 2016 and 2020. Councilman Cohen telling Fox 45 News he is proud of his work, and people from San Jose, Savannah, Cincinnati, and Philadelphia have reached out to him to learn more about his efforts, adding he is, quote, proud to serve other cities who are interested in developing trauma-responsive practices, adding his experience has allowed him to learn what other places are doing to address mental health and bring that knowledge back to Baltimore. Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
This week, Fox 45 News questioned Mayor Scott multiple times about safe streets. It comes after the FBI raided the safe streets location and the homes of a number of employees. Now, sources say it could be over alleged gang ties.
What do you say to taxpayers who are concerned about the possible link between this street gang in Baltimore and this program funded by the government that's supposed to prevent violence from happening?
What I'll say, Mackenzie, what I always say, no matter who it is, right? If they're doing that kind of activity, whether they're a police officer, whether they're a DPW worker, whether they work at the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, anybody, any individual that has those kind of ties will be dealt with through law enforcement. I don't care if it's Mackenzie Frost, whoever it is. If they're in the streets of Baltimore and they're doing things with BGF or any other organized person, if we find out, we will do what we do all the time. If you're involved in illegal activity, it can be my mother. She'll be treated the same way.
For years, Fox 45 has been fighting for details on the Safe Streets program, demanding answers from city leaders on who is hired by the program, what workers do on a daily basis, and how the money given to Safe Streets is spent. Tonight, a taxpayer watchdog says the lack of transparency in the program is alarming, especially with the new developments of the FBI investigation.
Fox 45 filed your Sunshine Open Records request asking for the payroll names of the violence interrupters that work for the Safe Streets program. Those names were redacted from the payroll information. Now you have the city's top charities running this program. You got Catholic Charities running this. You got LifeBridge running this. And look, they were not transparent with who works in those positions. And now you've done a great job of, over the course of the last 10 to 12 years, exposing gang infiltration on the violence interrupter payroll.
And Fox 45 will continue to press city leaders for answers on the Safe Streets program spending and bring you the latest on the FBI investigation as we learn more. As the war in Israel continues, we're seeing growing anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim sentiment across the country. The White House released a statement calling a new TikTok trend celebrating Osama bin Laden repugnant. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has more.
TikTok once again under fire after Osama bin Laden's letter to America went viral.
I need you to stop what you're doing and go read A Letter to America.
The way this letter is going viral right now is giving me the greatest sense of relief.
Gen Z Americans praising the 2002 letter in which bin Laden lays out his justification for killing 3,000 Americans on 9/11.
This letter is so well written and so reasonably structured. Like, everything he said was valid.
TikTok quickly removed the posts and hashtags fueling their spread, but that didn't stop renewed calls for a ban of the Chinese-owned app. Representative Mike Gallagher weighing in.
These people are, of course, massive idiots. It's absolutely disgusting and further evidence that we need to ban TikTok.
GOP presidential candidate Nikki Haley also calling for a TikTok ban, writing, "Stop giving the Chinese Communist Party the ability to influence Americans." The social media company responding directly to Haley's accusations, writing, "Content promoting this letter clearly violates our rules on supporting any form of terrorism." Bin Laden's writings resurfacing amid online discussions about the Israel-Hamas war. New polling by Intelligent.com finding 86% of college students say they learn about the war from social media. 1/3 of students admitted they don't fact-check information on these issues. Regardless, Gen Z users say the content they're exposed to online has a real impact on their views.
I just read A Letter to America, and I will never look at life the same. I will never look at this country the same.
The Biden administration quickly condemned the pro-bin Laden TikToks, but as some called to ban the app, Biden's re-election campaign is reportedly considering joining it to connect with young voters ahead of 2024. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
Well, criminals are using your loved ones' voices to steal your money. The new scam that's leaving some families traumatized.
And we are getting ready for a cold front, and that's going to bring a big cool down tomorrow. We're talking 59, but temperatures will be even lower as we head into Thanksgiving week. I'll let you know what to expect for the holiday coming up in my Weather Authority forecast.